Well, we appreciate you joining us today for this session of the AgrAbility National Training Workshop Encore webinars. My name is Paul Jones. I manage the National AgrAbility Project at Purdue University. And our topic today is From Loss to Resilience, the Science of Grief. Our presenters today, Jorge Estrada from AgVance Solutions LLC and Gina Forte from Leadership Coaching International Incorporated. For those who are not familiar with AgrAbility, we are a program sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We focus on assisting basically anybody in agriculture with virtually any type of disability or functional limitation. Every one of the AgrAbility projects around the country is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. Currently, there are 21 state AgrAbility projects, plus the National AgrAbility Project, again here at Purdue University, through the Breaking New Ground Resource Center. Our partners on that national grant include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes and Washington State University. If you're interested in more information about AgrAbility, you can check agrability.org. There are currently over 170 archived webinars there that you can view at your convenience. We do acknowledge and appreciate the support of the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Our presenters today, Jorge Estrada, has been Global Coaching Alliance Latin America lead for 8 years, contributing to executive coaching and consulting projects throughout Latin America. He has over 20 years experience in organizational development consulting, leadership development, executive coaching, change management, multicultural team effectiveness, and strategic planning with national and international corporations. Jorge is a passionate, people-driven professional who believes in and helps leaders leverage their talents and abilities to produce meaningful work and a fulfilling, balanced life. Gina Forte de Morales is a grief educator and thanatologist. As co-founder and general director of Escuela Renuevo, she designs and facilitates programs that integrate coaching and thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. Her work combines compassionate grief support with deep expertise in emotional resilience and personal growth. Gina has co-authored international publications on grief and female leadership and has collaborated with businesses, family enterprises, and public institutions in building emotionally healthy environments. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, turn things over to Jorge and Gina.
Apologies, I had rejoined and I was not able to speak. So a good day to everyone. My name is Jorge Estrada. As Paul has introduced us, Gina and I have been collaborating on and off over the last 16 years. A lot of work in Latin America, some in the US, and happy to be here. The subject matter, and Gina, you're going to share the presentation. All right, thank you. So I'm seeing some names. I think you might have been with us in the session in New Mexico. The session in New Mexico was in the March-April meeting in Albuquerque. And as I spent some time there because Gina joined virtually and I was there in person, I got a chance to interact with a number of people that were in the program and that were either speakers or participants. And we got to talking about this subject that we're talking about here today. What is it that process-wise that takes us from the moment that we have a loss in life, and we're going to talk about this, but how do we get from that moment of losing something or somebody, or we'll talk about that, to the moment where we can feel that we are being resilient and moving on with life. So this science of grief is of particular interest to us from not only the standpoint of the clients that we work with, because we work in corporate settings as well as in other aspects. Gina has worked in agriculture on and off over the years. I particularly have a love for dairy in the U.S. because that's where I have grown up since 1987, and that's where I have most of my experiences. So, Gina, please take us to the first slide there, where I would like to just begin this whole notion or the whole idea that we are gathered here to think through, to talk about. Think about a loss that you have had either recently or you are currently in the process of, and or think about a process that may have occurred some time back. And put yourself into that perspective of what goes on with us as human beings. You know, I recently lost a dear family member, basically not family, but my godmother, you know, my godfather and mother, they are, we have been very close over the years. And that's what we're talking about at her funeral. But, you know, what kinds of losses do we experience in life? I went through a divorce back in 2002. I'm happily remarried. Gina knows my wife very well. I know her husband very well as well. Divorce, being let go from a job. I grew up somewhat in agriculture. My grandpa had a beef dairy operation. It was a few animals, 42 animals, milked by hand. And so seeing loss in agriculture was also something near and dear to me. And I'm sure Gina will speak to a couple of things, but that's what we're here to bring up with you, to go over, so that we can hopefully make a contribution to your life at this moment. So the perspective here is it possible? And I think I'm answering it here on the screen. It's impossible to live a life for many years, you know, whatever God will allow us to live, 70, 80, 100, hopefully. I'm shooting for 100. It's impossible to live a life without experiencing pain at some point in our lives. And that's what we're here to encourage you to open your minds, your hearts, your soul to these processes that we go through in time. Life and pain go hand in hand. The process of living and being not only living a life on our own, but also as we interact with other human beings. You know, life and pain go hand in hand, and they're part of these what we might call dichotomies of the black and white, day and night, life and death, and love and pain. Right. So yes, I'm sure we have all experienced love at some point in time, but in life, we have also experienced pain, and we live in a world of those dichotomies as well. So, with that introduction, let me hand it over to Gina, and a true certified, and I'm honored to work with her all the time here on this. Gina, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Jorge. It's an honor sharing again with you and with this audience, because I would like to join Jorge in thanking every one of you for being here, for choosing to be here today. It really gives us hope, because I'm sure that when we reflect on these topics, it allows us to love life more deeply, to be aware and to be grateful for the opportunity of being today alive, breathing, learning, sharing. So From Loss to Resilience is a workshop created to understand grief and also to bring light and strength in moments of pain. What we are going to try today is to share a little bit of thanatology, the science of grief, and we're going to explain why we call thanatology the science of grief. And at the end of the workshop, we would love you to leave this session with tools and with resources to go through the grieving process, because as Jorge was sharing, it is part of our lives. So I'll go back to our presentation and we will start exploring this wonderful topic of life and losses. We would like to start with this reality. Grief hurts. And it hurts because when we love someone or something, we become like attached to that person, relationship, or even an object or situation. And then when we lose this relation, this person, this situation, we elaborate a painful process. And that is the grieving process. So we could say, the more I love you, the more it hurts to lose you. When we have one-on-one sessions of thanatology, some persons ask, can I go through the process without pain? And the answer is really tough, because if it was important, if you loved, you are going to hurt. That's why we say grief hurts. But the nice thing about this is that the grieving process has a function. And the function is to restore and heal. Of course, we don't like to go through painful experiences, but going through a grieving process and understanding what's happening to me, why am I feeling in this way, what can I do with my emotions, with my thoughts, then it leads me to a healthy process. But failure to elaborate it can lead us to unhealthy or even pathological grief. So it is very, very important to understand this topic. But let's talk a little bit about thanatology. What is thanatology? We have some objects here. We are going to explain them. The word thanatology comes from thanatos. That is a Greek word that was the name given by the Greeks in their mythology to the goddess of death. And here it's interesting because the goddess of death, Thanatos, was the daughter of Euphorne. Euphorne was the goddess of the night. So let's try to understand the context. We have the mother, Euphorne. We have the daughter, Thanatos. Euphorne being the goddess of night, and Thanatos being the goddess of death. And Thanatos is represented by a sickle. And this object indicates that men and women are cut in groups like flowers, like herbs that are ephemeral. She's also represented with an amphora that serves to keep the ashes of the dead, and by a butterfly that flies, and it's like the sign or the emblem of hope into another life. Interesting topic that Euphorne has two children, Thanatos and Hypnos. Hypnos is the god of sleep. So the legend says that if Hypnos kisses you, you enter into a deep sleep. But if Thanatos kisses you, you never wake up. So interesting how they present these myths and how they are reflected nowadays in what we call thanatology. Death or Thanatos is a goddess capable of healing all ills. So she can heal all kinds of ills, sickness. But since she is the only one among of the gods who does not accept gifts, she never heals anyone. So see the concept of death. It comes at the right time, and there's no way of negotiating. That's the message sent here. And the other word derived from the Greek thanatology, logos, the great majority of philosophers gave the meaning of sense. But for this aspect, it has prevailed as study. So we could say that thanatology is the science of grief. And when we talk about grief, it's because we are experimenting a significant loss in life. So the loss is the event, is what happens, is what hits the life of a person. And the grief is the process. So the loss is the event and the grief is the process. When we talk about a process, we're talking about time, we're talking about responsibility of dealing with ourselves and knowing how to handle specific situations. So, Jorge, you had an idea of sharing with the audience and maybe having an exercise to reflect on this important topic. The loss is the event, the grief is the process.
Yes.
So give you time.
Sure. Thank you. And if I may ask openly, feel free to jump in, and Paul is helping us with that. If you could share in less than a minute, let's say, to give chance to a couple people here, anybody that's willing to share in the context that we have here. I mean, if you're participating, and thank you for all the abundance of participants today. Anybody that would like to share either an event or a process, a grieving process that you may be going through now, and just share openly a couple of things you would like us to know about you and your situation. Let's see if we can get a couple of participants to do that, please.
And if you'd like to raise your hand, you can do that. I will try to unmute you, or you can add those comments into the chat.
Yes. Thank you, Paul. Anybody that would like to enlighten us? I will share one that happened just yesterday. I am doing leadership coaching for the manager of a calf facility in Colorado. I work with the CEO of the company, owner, and this guy, Noel, he manages about 10,000 calves, baby calves, on a dairy. But yesterday, I'm sorry, it was Monday. Monday, he came forth and told me we have worked maybe 5 or 6 sessions. And he sent on WhatsApp a message, Jorge, I've spoken to my boss and I wanted to be open with you that I have a alcohol problem. So he and I had a session at the end of the day on Monday, but what I want to get to here is that he himself has been dealing with other stuff in his life. I was not aware. He even caught the CEO off guard on the news, but you can imagine the heavy weight on this person's shoulders and the grieving process that he's been going through because of loss in the family and wife and teenage daughter going through some issues. What does grieving have to do with a person that finally maybe hits rock bottom? Those are words from him, you know, and the process that he has begun by coming forth with this, and then starting the process of letting go and grieving his alcoholic self or the sober self. So that's one. Thank you for already joining here with a couple. Thank you, Michelle. I lost my aunt to cancer 3 months ago and a best friend to dementia 3 months before my aunt. Imagine the frequency of the losses there, how that can have a compounding effect, if I may. Michelle, I hope you're finding support through the process. Haley, lost my grandpa last year in the spring, was with him when he passed, and my uncle passed away this past August. He was 59. And those are young ages, right? 59. I'm 59. Haley, thank you for sharing. Sonia, lost my husband of 30 years, 4 years ago, cousin, cancer 9 months ago. Again, this frequency. Gabrielle, lost my mother-in-law this spring, and it has been tough on me and my husband. So, and in the family, right? And then beyond, thank you, Gina. Gina lost my sister and stepson both at the age of 34, and tragically. The loss, as I got around in the meeting in the spring in New Mexico, there were so many sharings that had to do with losing a limb, and having some sort of a limitation physically as a result. So all these losses, right? The event, the process, right? There's the event. We many times have it very clearly in our minds, in our souls, because the hurt that comes with it. But the process, what we're calling grieving and thanatology today, an important element of it, whether we want to see it as it is, as a process, or we even recognize the process and parts of it. Gina, let's continue on. I appreciate everybody that's been sharing already openly. Let's go back to Gina for a few more minutes on the process itself, so that we can see those elements.
Okay. Thank you very much for participating and sharing yourselves. Because when I was reading your messages, well, each message humanizes us. We are all in the same path, and we are all experimenting losses. The important thing here is to know that grief is an adaptive emotional process. If we consider this, then it is like less frightening to go through the process, because the reason of being in grief is to have our emotions like adapted to the new concept, like learning to live without the person, the relationship, or the object of our love. So knowing that grief is an adaptive emotional process helps us a lot to move forward. And you just identified important losses in your life, and you were sharing there in the chat. What we would like to do now is we are going to show you the, well, before showing the model that I want to show, let me explain a little bit about it. We call thanatology a science because Elizabeth Kubler-Ross established its foundations following strictly the scientific method. She was a psychiatrist, and as a doctor, she compiled studies with more than 20,000 cases. It is important because she registered more than 20,000 cases of patients near death. And then she established a model of grieving process, noticing the stages that most people go through when they are facing a significant loss. And again, it is very important to understand that this study, or this model that I'm going to show in a minute, it shows like what people are facing when they experiment a significant loss. But it is what most people go through. Not everyone. We don't go stage by stage, and the grief is like our fingerprint. Everyone lives it in a different way. This model helps us because, when we talk about significant losses, we are not just referring to death of a loved one, as Jorge was sharing at the beginning, but any other loss that is meaningful to us. Divorce, moving from one country to another, even being fired from a job, ending a relationship, and so on and so forth. So the model we're going to share now is based on the one presented by Kubler-Ross, but this one also has contributions from other grief specialists. And I would like to encourage you that while I present it, try to identify which of these stages you might be in. Again, it's important to say that these stages are not linear. So it doesn't mean that one comes after the other always, or that all of them are going to be present in our grieving process. But they might appear, they might be present. And knowing them can help us understand ourselves and knowing what to do in that stage. So let's see the stages and look if you feel identified with some of them. So let me go back to the presentation and show you the model. Okay. So we have here time and here the grieving process. Because as we mentioned, if it is a process, it takes time. And of course, I always say that the person in grief, the grieving, has an important and a very vital part in the healing process. The first stage that might appear after the event, after the loss hits our life, is doubt. In this first stage, we can experiment shock, denial, like confusion. We don't believe what's happening. We think, no, I'm dreaming. When I open my eyes, everything is going to be different. But that's the first stage, and some grief specialists explain that this first stage works like a protection for us, because when the loss hits our life, we're not ready to understand it. We're not ready to live it fully. So it gives us time, and it goes slowly. Then the second stage that might appear, it's like retreatment. It is like, for example, you're driving, you are alone in your car, and you have like burst and unusual weeping. You feel despair, and these outbursts appear. It is perfectly normal in a grieving process. Why do we say it is normal? Because, well, after observing more than 20,000 cases, it happened to most of people experimenting these kind of losses. The third stage, it's interesting, anger. So we feel angry with the cause of the loss, even with the person who abandons. And in the case of death, even with the deceased. But remember that anger is an emotion that gives you like strength to move forward. So it appears, and it is there for a reason, and it is normal. But knowing that it might appear and that we can be in any of these stages can help us to go through our process in a more healthy way. Guilt, this one is interesting, and it appears in most of the process that I have the honor of being with the grieving to accompany the grief. Guilt for what was not done. Guilt for what could have been and was not. Guilt for what was done in the way it was done. Guilt for what could have been avoided. And we can continue with a large list. But listening to David Kessler, a grief specialist from the United States, he was sharing that our brain prefers to feel guilty instead of accepting the reality of the loss, the reality of death in this case. Can you imagine the tricks that our brain plays? The other stage is sadness. And if you see, this stage is really touching the grieving process in this line, because it's sadness, but it is a sadness that could be confused with depression. And it is natural to feel this isolation, like feeling that you can't do anything to solve the situation. But most of the time, you don't need medication because it's part of the process. Of course, if you keep on feeling deeply sad and you are not able to continue with your life, it is recommendable to see a doctor. But knowing that this sadness is part of the process can lead us to being more patient with ourselves. Because after this stage, we might experiment this wonderful stage number 6, that is expansion. When we talk about expansion, it's this stage that enables us to change. This is like we have like a broader view. We see new realities, and we are ready to build transcendency today. And after this stage, we go to the last stage of the grieving process, that is acceptance and peace. Acceptance of the loss, and we are able to focus on what we have. Acceptance of living happily, even without the object of our love, the subject of our love, even without that person. It's like replacing that person in our heart and knowing that it's always going to be part of our story, but we can move forward. Accept that losses are not in our hands. And when I say move forward, I'm not saying forgetting, I'm not saying nothing happened. It's like learning to live without. Learning to live without and learning to contact with more love than pain. So, Jorge, would you like to tell us a little bit about resilience when
thing.
after we
Sure thing.
Mhm.
Before we go there, I wanted to mention Farah was asking a question.
Okay.
She says, "Can you speak to secondary trauma of grief?" She says, "I'm 48 and starting to get to the age where family is passing away, friends are going through cancer, and I'm supporting clients through hard things. We watch TV and social media, see the terrible things happening in our government and around the world. I'm witnessing and empathizing with so much grief. I'm thankful to be physically healthy, but sometimes it's hard to witness and carry other people's griefs too. Any advice?" So I'll mention a couple of things, and Gina, if you want to as well. Um, those of us that accompany people in the processes, we also get our own help. I do executive coaching. I have an executive coach myself. And in the grieving process, I have worked with thanatologists like, not Gina because she's a close friend, but I also have worked with thanatologists, this whole grieving process. So it's important to also look to see if you, Farah, important for all of us ourselves to see how much help we are needing, and especially if we are also in the helping professions. It's important to get. I can relate to what she's saying. I grew up in the 70s, and I'm dating myself. I grew up in the 70s in Guatemala, and those of us that grew up a long, long time ago, and I'm sure every era, every generation can speak to things differently, but things are changing so rapidly in some regards, more than others. See so much war, see so much conflict. See communities. It's hopeful to see communities that are gathering, families that are gathering in a new way to try to be maybe more conscious and more aware of what's happening in the environment, but not let that contaminate that core or that community and that caring that we get from that closer the proximity of having one another. So that's what I would mention about Farah's question.
Yeah, and I would like to add, Jorge, that and thank you for sharing, Farah, because again, this humanizes us in this profession and in this path of life. It is also important to understand that we are not really carrying other people's grief. It is important to not carry their grief. We are there to connect. We are there to witness their pain, and we are there to walk with them, to be present. But it is very important not to carry their gift. It is not even for us who accompany grief processes. It is very important to understand that we are there to connect. We are there to make like the path less tough, and we are there to be one human in front of another human that is suffering, and that is what heals. That is what heals. One human helping from the heart to heart.
Thank you, Gina. And if you can please return the PowerPoint so we can
Sure.
continue, and we'll try to address a couple of the other things coming up on the chat. The I love to talk about an example that is a nature-related example, because I had seen back in the 80s National Geographic. My mom used to get them. She loved that magazine. And I saw the event at Mount St. Helens in Washington State. And I was blessed to have lived many years in outside Seattle, and went to see the that was back in 96, 97 when I was there. So years had passed, but what was striking to me was that I was somewhat close to where the event happened. There are overlooks, and there are places where you can see the site, but there were so many species of flora, of trees and bushes and everything else that were coming up from the very dust, the very, the bare soil that was there after the explosion and the eruption. And that's what I call resilience. Resilience is all over us. Where there is life, there is resilience. Years had passed after that event at Mount St. Helens, but those seeds were able to fly from somewhere nearby, establish themselves again in a place where there had been tall trees sometime before that. So let's talk a little bit about what this resilience is, and I'll cite three somewhat definitions of resilience. The first one says it is to initiate a new development after a trauma, that requires doing some work around the trauma and healing and so on, but a new development, a new life, a new project, or there's another one here. It's the capacity to take advantage of our internal resources and adapt to adverse situations with well-being. Here, the operative word here is get that well-being as a result of the process of resilience. Adaptive is an adaptive process. So this is a word that you will relate to, and especially in the context of what Gina has shared. Gina and I wrote something up, and see how it tastes. We wrote resilience is the competency of navigating change and transformation in self, also in systems, right? Systems can go through these processes that we talked about. Maneuvering through a challenge, understanding the grieving process, learning, letting go, and creating a new reality that carries a better version of ourselves or myself to be fulfilled as an effective human in the next stage of life. So how does resilience play a role? If we can advance to the next one, Gina, please. Resilience comes when the conditions that are needed for it allow it. All right. There are studies that show that one of the most important factors in resilience is having loving and supportive relationships within and outside the family. I was reviewing this, and I was thinking, we're about to get together for Christmas with some of my friends that, holy cow, these guys I've known for 52 years. And each one of them and myself have gone through, but and we've been there for each other, passing of parents or close ones, or losing a job or things of that sort, right? But loving people that love us, or that we can feel that supportive relationship. Those relationships that emanate, that exude love and trust. This is another factor here, because when we feel the trust, and believe me, because I'm measuring myself on oxytocin these days, when we are in a trusting environment and relationship, we secrete more oxytocin. When we're in a loving relationship, we secrete oxytocin, right? But that love and trust that provide these role models and that offer encouragement and security, these are the other conditions that allow for this resilience, right? Somebody might be there to challenge us, giving us some TLC, some tender, loving, tough love. What's it? Tough love, I meant. Tough love, but also TLC. The tough love of asking us the tough questions, or helping us move along, or running us through the ringer, right? But that offer that encouragement and security, all of that contributes to strengthening a person's resilience. So important for you to look around, and I'm talking about those around us, but it's also a consideration in resilience how we're loving ourselves, giving ourselves the time and the permission to process grief is also an aspect of loving ourselves. So let's continue here to the next one, please, Gina, and to cite, Blanca de Aratun on resilience. Resilience involves more than just surviving events. I know many stories of people that have lost a limb or had some sort of physical disability. I myself was diagnosed with a condition. My left femur was the calcifying when I was 9 years old. And the first doctor that saw me told my mother in front of me that I might have to use crutches the rest of my life. And that was shocking to me, to the family. Days later, we were seeing a second opinion, and that gentleman gave me hope. He explained to me what I had, and the doctor said, we're going to, year and a half wearing crutches. But you know how it is. Any of these events that cause us to grieve, that we have a hard time, because that's also human, right? And the compassion that we might have toward another human being and toward ourselves, in coming to terms with it so that we can somewhat let go of it, but also there's so much learning as a result of that. How much we want to learn out of it defines how much, the resilience process as coming out of a situation. So resilience involves more than just surviving events. It includes the ability to be transformed by them and build on them, giving them meaning and allowing us a path to success, or, a path forward. So I leave you with that definition as well, after having covered a few aspects here. I think, Gina, we have one more slide.
Yes, Jorge, but we still have some questions here that I would like to answer.
Let's do. Go ahead.
Are there times, Lillian writes, are there times where we relapse back into previous stages of grieving for a given loss? Yes, of course. You have triggers, like, for example, dates, a birthday, anniversary, Christmas, important events that were celebrated with the person, or related or linked to the person that is not with us anymore. Yes, we can go back to stages, but once you have gone through the process and you have experimented at least stage 6, which is expansion or acceptance and peace, you might go back, but your visits are going to be shorter. Are going to be shorter, and that is what most grief specialists say, and I have seen it. So yes, it is normal, but the visits are shorter. And there's another question, Jorge, that two persons are talking about the same. It is
Yeah.
Jennifer and Meg. I was thinking, probably recalling incorrectly, that this theory is the potential experience of a person who is dying. I understand it could also be applied to the loss of things other than life, such as identify a job, etc. Are you saying these stages of grief also apply to the survivor that is losing a loved one? Yes, of course, because the model we showed you is based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model, but is not exactly the same model. What has happened is that when grief specialists started studying the science of grief and working with the survivors that lost loved ones or people going through important losses, they saw that these psychological phenomena also appeared. So what we showed you is not the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model exactly like she presented it, but it is enriched with other grief specialists. For example, we have in Latin America people working really hard on these topics. We have Dr. Andres Gottfried from Argentina. We have a psychiatrist in Mexico. He already died, but he has 3 magnificent books talking about this model applied to not only the ones that are near death or that have received a diagnostic. I'm going to remember the name of the specialist in Mexico in a minute. I'm going to write it in the chat. And also, well, if you're interested in the topic, David Kessler worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he just wrote a book like 2 or 3 years ago that is called the Sixth Stage, that is making sense of my own life after losing something or someone important. So the answer here is yes. Jorge, I don't know if you want to say anything
I
else.
wanted to mention an example. I have a almost 9-year-old golden retriever, Isco. I love him dearly. He's been raised in the family with love, and I cannot even fathom the idea of losing him. I have had friends that lose their pets, but I speak to this because it is. Now that there are so many of us that own a dog, a cat, or another pet, there are that's a reality that we face, right? A grieving process as a result of the loss of our loved pet. So I have friends that have a veterinary clinic here in Guatemala City. I'm in Guatemala City today. That have a thanatologist like Gina available to accompany people that are clients of the veterinary clinic in the grieving process. So examples of, as it was mentioned, all the types of losses and grieving that we may have about job, pets, a loved one, so on.
Jorge,
Please.
I just wrote the names of the grief specialists that talk about this that you were asking there. You can Google them and you can read their books and you will enjoy the reading. We still have like 3 minutes and we would like to share the last part of our presentation with you. That is something that we consider important in this aspect of talking about grief. To close this session, we chose to share a beautiful legend from an African tribe. It's called the Child's Song. And well, let me share the story with you, the legend. It says that when a woman in this tribe knows she's pregnant, is the Himba tribe, if you're interested in going deeper. Pregnant, she goes out into the wilderness with a few friends, and together they pray and they meditate until they hear the song of the child. It is like revealed to them. They recognize that every soul has its own vibration that expresses its unique flavor and purpose. And then, when women receive the song, they sing it out loud and they return to the tribe to teach it to everyone else. When the child is born, the community gathers and sings the child's song to him or her. Later, when the child enters education, the village gathers and chants the child's song. And when child passes through the initiation of adulthood, again, they come together and sing. At the time of marriage, the person hears his or her song. And finally, when the soul is about to pass from this world, the family and friends gather and at the person's bed, just as they did at the birth, and they sing the person to the next life. But in the African tribe, there is one other occasion upon which the villagers sing to the child. And please pay attention to this part of the story because it's wonderful. If at any time during his or her life, the person commits a crime or an aberrant social act, the individual is called to the center of the village, and the people in the community form a circle around him or her, and they sing their song. The tribe recognizes that the best correction for this misbehavior is love and the remembrance of the identity. So we chose this story to close the session because when we recognize our own song, we have no desire or need to do anything that would hurt another one. So may each one of us find our song and hold to it in times of need and in times of grief. It is our deep hope that you can go through the grieving process with more love than pain. And Jorge, we still have like 1 minute to close.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. Paul, yeah. Are there any last questions that you want to write on the chat? Or we are done with the time, Paul, I can understand that. Wanted to thank the participants for sure.
We're officially done with our time, but if there are any last questions, we can hang around for a couple minutes. I see people expressing thanks and appreciation, which we definitely echo. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion about this topic. I think everybody definitely took something from it, no matter where they're at in their life process, because, as you say, everybody encounters these issues at one point or another. At this point, I'm not seeing more questions or a raised hand.
We can, thank you, Paul. It's available. If you guys would like the presentation, reach out. I think our phone numbers and emails are in the system. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Gina and Jorge. And thank you to everybody that participated today, for those who shared their own stories and comments in the chat, and for everyone who joined in. So again, we're recording this. We'll plan to get it archived, hopefully by the end of the week or the beginning of next, and we'll let you know when that's available. Our next webinar in this series is coming up, and that is on November 19th. Be calm, be well, and that's BEE. So it's going to be a discussion of beekeeping. Adam Ingrao, who is with Heroes for Hives, will be presenting a session on therapeutic beekeeping. So again, thank you to everybody, and we wish you a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Our email was being requested. I just wrote it on the chat. If you guys have a little bit of time there to take a picture or snapshot of it.
We'll leave the room open for a few minutes so people can check that out.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you.